Hey everybody, this is Mr. McKee again with Net 225, and this is part of the ENSA Cisco course. All right, today I want to go over troubleshooting the packet tracer, which is 2.2.13, which is labeled point-to-point single area OSPF version 2 configuration. All right, now what we can see on the activity window, we see all our routers with the interfaces and IP addresses associated with them, as well as the network masks. All right, that's not an issue. All right, so if we go over, let's see, topology, we have 3 routers, each have 3 interfaces, 2 WANs and 1 LAN interface. All right, remember, solid black lines are straight through cables. The Z pattern red cables are serial connections. All right, so that's pretty common. All right. So if we go down here, what I want to show you is some of my students are having difficulties with actually setting up OSPF routing. The first part of this, configure router IDs. All you really do there is, router OSPF process ID. All right, that's not an issue. And then you put in the router ID itself, which is right here. All right, that's not a big deal. Now, what you got to do though, to get back to the config router, you got to put in the router OSPF process ID command again on the routers. All right, you can't just put it in the privileged exec mode or the global config mode. It won't work. All right, so here's the real issue. Part 2, step 1. Configure networks for OSPF routing using network commands and wildcard masks. Because you can do it like that. You can do it OSPF routing using IP interfaces and configure OSPF routing on router interfaces. And that one's probably the easiest because you put it on the interface that you can see there. All right, and that one you don't have to put the router OSPF process ID and then configure the router configurations. So it looks like I'm going to look at his results. He has 66% right now. Up here, notice he's got this part right, so that's router 3, I believe. You've activated all 3 routes by configuring OSPF on interfaces. What he still needs to correct though is this is router 1. You have not activated any of the OSPF routes on router 1 using the network address and wildcard mask method. And remember, wildcard mask is the inverse of a subnet mask, and he's also not configured OSPF routing on router 2, which says you have activated none of the R2 routes using the interface IP and quad 0 route method. All right, and quad 0 is all zeros. All right, so let's get back to here. Let me get that. So what I'm going to do first is actually show you, let's look at router 3. Router 3, do enable. All right, I want to do a show run. Now, if I go down through here, if you notice, all the interfaces, that one has IP address, IP OSPF process ID 10, area 0, that's fine. This one doesn't have anything connected to it. This is another interface. All right, IP OSPF area 0, that's fine. In this last one, 0011, it has an IP OSPF 10 area 0, so that's fine. Down here in router OSPF 10, he's configured the router ID, which is all 3s, and that's really it for us. If you notice for sure OSPF is not running, you can do router IP. Let's do a show IP route. Okay, so there's show IP route. Notice here, if OSPF was running, it would have an O, right, for OSPF. All these are like this right here is an actual network, all right, and it is connected. All right, this is a local interface. Notice 32, so that means it's referring to the IP address itself, and then down here this is the same thing for that interface, that network, that IP address. Down here, that network, this IP address. All right, and if we go to router 2, which we're going to configure first, well, actually, you know what? Let's go to router 1, and I've already been messing with it. Show run. All right, notice we don't have it assigned to the interface itself. We're going down through here. He did put in passive interface gigabit 000, configured the router ID of 1111, but nothing else that is there. So we're going to have to put some more configurations in here. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Now router 1 right here, I can see what it's connected to, so it's going to be pretty easy. So I'm going to do config terminal, and now I need to do, this is probably where a lot of people have problems. You want to do router space OSPF space process ID 10. All right, and notice I'm in the config router, and I wish I could zoom in on this, but it's like it's pretty hard to zoom in on it. All right, so I'm at the config router for router 1. Now down here, and hopefully you guys understand this, how many statements are required to configure OSPF to route all the networks attached to R1? Well, that'll be 3 because we have 3 networks connected, which is that one, this one, and this one. All right, subtract the dotted decimal subnet mask from all 255s. What is the result? All right, so if you take a .24, which is a 255.255.255.0, if you subtract that, that'll give you 0.0.0.255. All right, so it's the exact inverse, not the inverse of this. It's just saying take that, subtract whatever you have in your network from that number, all 255s, and what's the result? Okay, so that'll be our wildcard mask in this case. All right, what is the dot decimal equivalent of \30? And notice that these are \30s. Each of those networks, router to router connection. So all you're going to need is minimum a \30 will give you the first address will be the network address, 2 interface addresses, 1 to each router, and then a broadcast address. So you can get by with 4. So that'll be four IP addresses needed. So what that gives you is a \30 is a 255.255.255.252. So if you take 255 minus 252, that gives you a 3. So 0.0.0.3. And I know 3 looks weird when you put that in, but remember 0 is your first binary number. All right. In this case, it would be the network address. So remember, a .3 is actually representing 4 addresses. Excuse me. All right, and let's see. So subtract the from that. All right, configure the routing process on R1 with the network statements and wildcard masks that are required to activate OSPF routing for all the attached networks. The network statement values should be the network or subnet address of the configured networks. All right, so here's the way we have to enter it. We have to do network, and notice where we're at on the global config mode. We're in router, and then config router, and that's exactly where I'm at right now. All right, so I'm going to have to do network, and remember my first network is right here, and 192.168.10.0. Okay, that's my network address, but let's look in here. It's asking for a wildcard mask. So my wildcard mask is the inverse of a 255.255.255.0. So it's going to be a 0.0.0.255. All right, and then we have to tell it the area in case we have multiple areas. The area is 0, and that says wherever it says. Does it tell us that? I know it's that number, but let's see. I'm trying to see where it says 0. Well, it doesn't say 0, but I know it's 0, so let's put 0. All right, area 0, hit enter. All right, notice our completion rate goes up to 72. We're on our way. All right, and now if I do up arrow when I'm clicked on the terminal for R1, it gives me the history, so I can go back and take out whatever I need to take out. And next thing we're going to do is the 10.1.1.0 network. All right, so I'm going to take out all this. 10.1.1.0. All right, my wildcard mask is the inverse of a 255.255.255.252 subnet, so that's going to be a 0.0.0.3. All right, take off that last 255. All right, so make sure all your spacing's correct. So network 10.1.1.0 space 0.0.0.3 space area 0. All right, and we just told it what two networks are on there. And then finally, I'm going to do an up arrow again, and our final network is right here. All right, and when you talk about that 3, the 0.0.0.3, notice right here, very first address is 0, 1, 2, and 3 is your broadcast, and then it goes over to a 4 for the next network. All right, so we know that makes sense to us now. Hopefully, it'll be a 4 for the network, and then it'll stay a 0.0.0.3 for the wildcard mask. All right, hit enter, and then that should be it. And notice it actually started to give us log messages. All right, and matter of fact, it found a neighbor. Router 1 found router 3. So that's good stuff. We didn't see that before. All right, but now let's go over to router 2 and look at it. All right, enable, enter, and then configure. Well, actually, let's do show run. All right, looking at the interfaces, nothing set for OSPF on there. The only OSPF is configured down here, OSPF 10, router ID 2.2.2.2, and a passive interface for the LAN, which is right there, 20.0. All right. So let's just look at the end of it. All right, now we're going to do the actual interfaces. And now, for some reason, the way they have this set up, I can view all the interfaces in Packet Tracer by going up here, under Preferences, right there. Sometimes this doesn't work great, but that shows you all the interfaces. Well, kind of, sort of does. All right, but I don't like that sitting there like that. I'm going to go back to Preferences. And I could click that too, but it's kind of jumbled up. All right, so what we want to do is, let's see, quad 0 masks. So interface addresses and quad 0 masks. So if we go up to the addressing table, IP addresses right there, and wildcard masks. So let's do that. All right, and same thing as router 1. Let's go to enable and then config terminal to go to global config mode. And now I want to go to right there, router OSPF, SPF 10. All right, so we're down there. Same thing as being down here, right? All right, now we're going to do, make sure I'm looking at the right IP addresses, 192.168.10. 20.1, 20.1, and then we're doing the wild, I guess you would say the wildcard mask of a 255.255.255.255, which is a /32, which means we're talking about just that specific IP address itself. All right, so 0.0.0.0, and then area 0. All right. Oh, you know what I need to put? I need to put network so it knows what I'm talking about. Network space. All right, there we go. All right, notice completion rate's 88%. Next thing we got to do is go to, and what I'm going to do also, I'm going to do up arrow to stay on that configuration. I'm going to take out the IP address, and then the next IP address in line is 10.1.1.2. 10.1.1.2. All right, make sure it's going to be all zeros for everything for that. All right, that's fine. And then finally, and notice we're starting to get hello messages. So let's not get confused by that. But the last thing we need to do is the serial 011, which is 10.1.1.9. 10.1.1.9. And as soon as I hit enter, I should get a neighbor hello message from, if I already got one from 1, I'll get one from 3, maybe. All right. But we should get those now. All right, notice that 100%. There's a hello message we just got from neighbor 3. All right, so we're good now. If we look back here, completion rate's 100. We're good. Check results. All right, that's all configured. So remember, OSPF, you can configure it 3 different ways. What's the most? What would you say? I don't know. I would say the easiest way to configure it is probably the interfaces. I mean, I would say that's probably the case. Or if you're already in the iOS, you can look at the interfaces, and if you know what interface you're looking at, you can just put IP OSPF area 0 for the interface itself. But that makes the most sense to me. But that's it. And if you're in my class, obviously you should take and do a screenshot of your completion rate. If you go to check results, it should say congratulations right here, you've completed everything. And if I notice here, I've completed everything. And that is it. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully that makes more sense. But yeah, when you get to dynamic routing protocols and things like that, it does get a little complicated. But just remember, once that happens, though, if one of these legs of this, say if this is an ISP, if one of these connections slows down or gets cut, it'll be able to go the other way. All right, but that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.